نشرة لأهم الأنباء والبداية مع أهم العناوين. جلالة الملك يلتقي مسؤولين أستراليين ومتخصصين في الشؤون الخارجية والدفاع والأمن ومحاربة الإرهاب. الملقي يؤكد خلال لقائه كتلة الإصلاح النيابي التزام الحكومة بالتشاركية الحقيقية مع مجلس الأمة. مجلس النواب يواصل مناقشة بيان الحكومة الوزاري التصويت على الثقة بالحكومة مساء اليوم. حياكم الله. أجرى جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني مباحثات مع رئيس الوزراء الأسترالي مالكوم تيرنبول في العاصمة كامبيرا اليوم، ركزت على علاقات التعاون بين البلدين وسبل تعزيزها في مختلف المجالات. كما تناولت المباحثات التطورات التي تشهدها منطقة الشرق الأوسط، خصوصا الأزمة السورية، الجهود الإقليمية والدولية في محاربة التطرف والإرهاب.
تطوير وتعزيز العلاقات الاقتصادية بين الأردن وأستراليا، إضافة إلى التطورات التي تشهدها الأزمات في الشرق الأوسط، تصدرت مباحثات جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني في العاصمة كامبرا مع رئيس الوزراء الأسترالي مالكوم تيرنبول. وتناولت مباحثات جلالة الملك وتيرنبول التي جرت في مقر البرلمان الأسترالي تعزيز فرص التعاون الاقتصادي والتجاري بين البلدين، وتطلع الأردن للاستفادة من الخبرات الأسترالية في مجال التدريب المهني والتقني لتطوير القدرات البشرية. المباحثات ركزت على التطورات التي تشهدها أزمات الشرق الأوسط، خصوصا الأزمة السورية وجهود محاربة الإرهاب، حيث أكدت جلالة الملك في هذا الإطار ضرورة تكثيف التعاون والجهود الإقليمية والدولية لمحاربة خطر الإرهاب ضمن استراتيجية شمولية، مشددا جلالته على أن الإرهاب الذي عانت منه العديد من الدول في العالم بات يهدد الجميع دون استثناء. من جهته أكد رئيس الوزراء الأسترالي أن بلاده تنظر للأردن بقيادة جلالة الملك بتقدير كبير، نظرا لما يتحمله من أعباء بسبب الأزمات الإقليمية وتداعياتها، لافتا إلى أنه بالرغم من هذه الأزمات استطاعت المملكة أن تبقى واحة من الأمن والاستقرار. وفي تصريحات صحفية مشتركة عقب المباحثات، أعرب جلالة الملك عن سعادته لزيارة أستراليا التي قال إنها تأتي في الوقت المناسب، حيث نحتفل بجوانب مهمة في علاقاتنا التاريخية.
Prime Minister, thank you very much, and again, on behalf of myself, Queen Rania, and my entire delegation, I wanted to thank you for the very kind words of hospitality and the warmth that we have all been received here in Australia by you, your government, and the Australian people, and I am really truly delighted to be here on my first visit to this great, wonderful country and people. As you mentioned, sir, this comes at a very interesting time in history where we celebrate long ties. You mentioned that our country is honouring the centennial of the Great Arab Revolt, where we had the honour and pleasure to see Anzac troops fight alongside Arab forces. We're very keen to continue to deepen the relationship between our two countries with all the challenges that we're facing, and I have no doubt that we will continue to move in a warm and brotherly direction. You did mention, sir, the signing of the joint declaration of enhanced cooperation and all the different sectors that that has covered. But this also comes at a time of close coordination on the international level at the UN Security Council, where Jordan and Australia co-hosted and authored 3 resolutions on humanitarian access to Syria. And there, the international community must continue to seek ways to tackle the unprecedented refugee crisis resulting from this Syrian conflict. We in Jordan have done more than our fair share in shouldering the burden on behalf of the world. However, again, here I would truly like to thank you, sir, and the people of Australia for the contributions and support for its pledges at the London conference and the resettlement of almost 12,000 refugees, the majority of which will be relocated from Jordan. And this is a tremendous moral responsibility that comes as no surprise to us that know your country and your people. The refugee influx has strained our budget and infrastructure, and this is why, again, I'm here to thank you and show our gratitude for the support that you have extended to us. Beyond the humanitarian impact, I want to emphasize that efforts must continue to achieving an inclusive political solution involving all components of society. And as long as such solutions remain elusive across the region, sectarian conflict and violence will continue to fester, and extremist groups will remain a threat to global security. And therefore, we must not forget that the issues of the region are connected and present a rallying cry for extremists, and at the core of which lies the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The lack of a process on a peace process after decades of conflict and continued provocations in Jerusalem and its holy sites remains a driver for extremist forces in our region and actually quite beyond. So we need to move beyond the process, and Jordan stands ready to assist in any way. And I am quite sure that as we move into 2017, Australia and Jordan will be working hand in hand in being able to deal with these challenges, not only in our region but globally. In conclusion, sir, thank you again for the wonderful hospitality you showed last night to myself, to Rania and our delegation. I look forward at being able to host you, I hope, and your family and your government in Jordan whenever you get the chance. And again, hand in hand, friends forever, and I look forward to seeing you in our part of the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
بدوره قال رئيس الوزراء الأسترالي إن الأردن هو أحد أقرب شركائنا في الشرق الأوسط، مقدرا الشراكة القوية بين المملكة وأستراليا.
Well, good morning, and I'd like to begin by paying my respects to you, Your Majesty, and thank you for your visit. We've had the most productive discussions. I don't think anybody can provide us with as much insight and wisdom on the challenges of your region than you do, sir. It was over 40 years ago, of course, in March 1976, Australia had the honour of hosting His Majesty King Hussein, the father, and today we are welcoming you. And the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is one of our closest partners in the Middle East, and you and your family have led your kingdom and your people with great wisdom in the midst of the most challenging region in the world. And we appreciate the very strong partnership between Australia and Jordan based on mutual respect, common perspectives and a shared desire to contribute to stability and security. Our friendship, as we noted earlier, is very long-standing, a century old, going back to the Great Arab Revolt, when Australian and Arab forces fought alongside each other in the lands that are now your Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. But we've said that our relationship couldn't be stronger, but we do keep strengthening it nonetheless. And today we've marked a new chapter with the signing of the Joint Declaration on Enhanced Cooperation. We have a commitment to elevate our relationship to an even higher level and to deepen our already strong ties. The Declaration expands cooperation across the breadth of our partnership. We'll seek opportunities to expand our economic ties. We'll build on our political partnership by holding regular ministerial meetings, and we will continue to strengthen our already very strong security, intelligence and counter-terrorism cooperation, together with the very strong links between our respective defence forces. Now, we are committing $220 million over 3 years to respond to the Syrian crisis, in addition to the $213 million provided in humanitarian assistance since 2011. And I'm pleased to record that we've signed another important document today, a Memorandum of Understanding on countering money laundering and terrorism financing. As key members of the Counter-Daesh coalition, Jordan and Australia stand together in rejecting those who seek to impose their perverse worldviews on others through division and violence. Your Majesty, for over 17 years, you personally have been a force for stability and modernisation in your country and in the region. As I outlined in my National Security Statement in November 2015, strengthening our cooperation with Jordan is an important and vital step in helping ensure the development of a more stable and secure Middle East. And there is no more reliable or indispensable partner for Australia in the Middle East than Your Majesty. You've been instrumental in deepening our engagement and our cooperation, so we thank you, Your Majesty, for your dedication over many years for peace, for security, and for strengthening the already very strong ties, a century old, between our two great nations.
وشهد جلالة الملك ورئيس الوزراء الأسترالي توقيع إعلان أردني أسترالي مشترك وقعه عن الجانب الأردني نائب رئيس الوزراء وزير الخارجية وشؤون المغتربين ناصر جودة، وعن الجانب الأسترالي وزيرة الشؤون الخارجية جولي بيشوب. وحدد الإعلان المشترك 6 محاور رئيسة للتعاون الاستراتيجي بين البلدين في المجالات السياسية والاقتصادية ومحاربة الإرهاب والدفاع والمجال الإنساني وحماية الحدود. كما شهد جلالته ورئيس الوزراء الأسترالي توقيع مذكرة تفاهم بين البلدين في مجال التعاون الأمني لمكافحة غسيل الأموال، وقعها عن الجانب الأردني نائب رئيس الوزراء وزير الخارجية وشؤون المغتربين، وعن الجانب الأسترالي وزير العدل ومساعد رئيس الوزراء لشؤون محاربة الإرهاب مايكل كينان. إلى ذلك عقد جلالة الملك لقاء مع وزيرة الشؤون الخارجية الأسترالية جولي بيشوب تناولت الجهود الإقليمية والدولية لمحاربة الإرهاب والفكر المتطرف، إضافة إلى الأزمة السورية وتداعياتها التي تسببت في حدوث أكبر أزمة لجوء في التاريخ. وفي لقاء آخر لجلالة الملك مع زعيم المعارضة في البرلمان الأسترالي النائب بيل شورتن، جرى استعراض علاقات الصداقة التي تجمع البلدين وتطورات الأوضاع الإقليمية والدولية، فضلا عن جهود إحياء مفاوضات السلام بين الفلسطينيين والإسرائيليين. وخلال الزيارة الملكية إلى أستراليا، زار جلالته وجلالة الملكة رانيا العبد الله المشتل الوطني في العاصمة كامبرا، حيث قام بزراعة شجرة بلوط. واستمع جلالتاهما من القائمين على المشتل إلى شرح عن تاريخ إنشائه عام 2005 عقب سلسلة الحرائق التي اجتاحت المنطقة وأتت على آلاف الأشجار والمساحات الخضراء. ودونت جلالة الملك وجلالة الملكة كلمتين في سجل كبار الزوار. إلى جانب تقديم جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني للرؤية الأردنية إزاء تحقيق حالة الأمن والاستقرار في المنطقة، حرص جلالته في العاصمة الأسترالية كامبرا على طرح الأردن بفرصه الواعدة كواحة آمنة وجاذبة للاستثمار، وبما يمكن البلدين من عقد شراكات اقتصادية بينهما من شأنها تقوية علاقات التعاون في العديد من المجالات. عماد الرقاد، التلفزيون الأردني، كامبرا.
أكد جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني أن تغير الإدارة الأمريكية نتيجة للانتخابات الأخيرة سيؤدي إلى تغيير الوضع القائم للعديد من القضايا التي نتعامل معها. أضاف جلالة الملك في مقابلة مع محطة ABC الأسترالية أجراها الإعلامي توني جونز مقدم البرنامج الحواري السياسي ليت لاين أنه لا يمكن حل الأزمة السورية بدون روسيا، وفيما يلي تسجيل للمقابلة.
Your Majesty, thanks for joining us.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Tony.
Can I start with the big question on everyone's minds? Could Donald Trump's presidency be a game changer in the Middle East?
It will definitely, I think, change the status quo of a lot of issues that I think we've been dealing with, and we'll have to see how the transition team comes along and what their view of our part of the world, but also the rest of the world. So it's not just, I think, people in our region that are sort of waiting with bated breath. I think everybody is.
Yes. Do you think the world's leaders are waiting with their fingers crossed quietly behind their backs after such a divisive campaign?
Well, I mean, it's something that I think kept all of us busy for the past 2 years. I have had the opportunity to speak to President-elect Donald Trump last week. The synergy was very good in a phone call conversation. I know many members of the transitional team, and obviously America is also built on institutions. So there will be some changes in policy, but I don't think to the extent that everybody's panicking about. So let's give them the benefit benefit of the doubt at this
One
stage.
of the, I guess one of the things that people are looking very closely at, the biggest conflict in the region in Syria. Are you at all concerned that President Trump will adopt what is essentially the Russian position of keeping President Assad and his regime in power indefinitely?
Well, I think all options are on the table at this stage. But again, I think I have to be very clear that I think most of us that understand Syria realize that there cannot be a solution without the Russians. And this has been something that all of us have been discussing for the past year or two. So at this stage, we have to wait to see what is the U.S. strategy, how they're going to deal with the Russians. I think this is what is on everybody's mind. But at the same time, I think you and I just briefly discussed before this interview, the concerns on the ground. So what happens in Aleppo, for example, which is a tremendous humanitarian disaster taking place? I don't think there's much we can do until the new administration is in place and a strategy is formulated and there is contact with the Russians. So on that level, on the ground level...
is that what's happened, do you think? Because the Russians pretty much walked away from the peace process. They gave the excuse that the Allies are supporting al-Sham, which is an offshoot of the al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda-backed rebels in eastern Aleppo. But of course, it does seem to everybody that they're just really waiting until the inauguration of a new president.
I think from the Russian point of view, we get the sense there is a wait and see who was going to win the elections and the new administration to be in place. So I think that they felt somewhat emboldened to do whatever they felt they needed to do in Syria. But at the same time, it's difficult to put blames when it comes to negotiations on who walks away from whom. What we all hope is as the new administration comes in and it sets itself and its strategy, that there is some synergy. At the end of the day, we're dealing with a global terror problem, a new third world war by other means, as I said, not post-Cold War, where I had a feeling that there was more hatred between Moscow and Washington than there was against the extremists that we're dealing with globally. I hope that changes because the priority is actually against this global threat.
So do you think that Trump-Putin, some form of agreement between the two could be an opportunity in Syria? And would you be prepared? And do you think the broader alliance be prepared to see Assad remain in place if that was the Russians' will?
Well, we definitely need an opportunity because things have not been going extremely well from the political prospect over the past 6 months, if not slightly longer. So unless there's an understanding by the Russians and the Americans to begin with as the major players and by the rest of us, we're going to be here a year from now just looking at the tragedy on the ground. But I have to remind people also that even if you do have a political process going, whether that involves Assad or not, what people tend to forget, they think, oh, there'll be a political process and then we don't have to worry about anything else. The second part of that is there is a war against terror inside of Syria. That's going to take some time. So politician thinks, oh, we've solved the politics, but the reality on the ground is going to be with us for much longer, and not just in Syria.
Just on that, you talked about synergies, and of course the Americans and the Russians have been talking about, even prior to this, setting up a joint operations base, a command to coordinate airstrikes. Do you think that's possible, and particularly would it be threatened if the Russians simply level eastern Aleppo with their aircraft in the meantime until January?
Well, so do people, as happens in many parts of our part of the world, try to create realities on the ground before people can sit around the table? So again, if we have now to wait until February, March, I think a lot of innocent people are going to suffer in the meantime. Having said that, on coordination, I know from firsthand that there has been some very successful coordination from the military aspect between the Russians and the United States on Syria and operations there. When the politics got worse or better, that obviously fluctuated. We hope that maybe now there's a new focus, but them sitting down around a table and agreeing is something that can be done. And we did see it on the military level in many parts of Syria.
Well, Trump has made it absolutely clear that his priority will be to destroy ISIS if he needs the Russians' help to do it, he'll obviously seek whatever help he can get. Is that possible to actually do that?
But I think the destruction of ISIS should be everybody's priority. And I keep saying this is where the global war is today. I mean, we look at it as a war, a civil war inside of Islam, but we can't do it without the help of Christians and Jews and other religions and other nations, because this thing is not just located in Syria or Iraq. It's in Libya. We're dealing with Boko Haram and Shabab. You have the Taliban, and actually in this neck of the woods, you also have your challenges. So unless we look at this in a global, holistic approach, we're never going to win. And so we've got to be, using an American vernacular, chew gum and walk at the same time. And that's been, I think, the frustration in the past, where it's Syria today, Iraq tomorrow. But even if you see now pressures on Syria and on Iraq for ISIS, we have seen for the past year commanders going to Libya. So if we're going to wait a year or two until we deal with Libya, and if you're successful in Libya, it's going to put pressure down on the Boko Haram and the Shabab aspects in East and West Africa, and then we'll think, oh, we'll talk to the Africans 2 years from now. We're never going to get this right.
So you have to do it all at the same time. And since you've gone down that path, do you seek, or are you in the process of creating cooperation with Australia, sitting in the middle of this region with the largest Muslim country, Indonesia, just to our north?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Australia plays such a pivotal role in international affairs. You have a very capable special forces. We've seen them in our neighbourhood over the past several years. So whether they work in our part of the world or whether we need to be able to nip it in the bud, so to speak, in certain regions here in the Far East, this is something that we have to do. I think your government understands that. We've had discussions along those lines. So have other responsible governments in the area.
Indonesia, have you been talking to the Indonesian government?
Yes.
And do you see Indonesia as being a critical part of this puzzle that you're trying to put together for a global war on jihadism?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at Indonesia as being the largest Muslim country in the world, there is a great synergy between the populations there. You have a Muslim majority country, but you've also got Catholics. The relationship has always been a comfortable one. What we don't want is to lose the opportunity of making sure that everybody shares and works together and have to come back and visit, I'm not saying Indonesia, but other countries in the region, solve a problem from a military point of view 3 or 4 years from now. So I think coordination with Indonesia, supporting Indonesia in making sure that the extremist threat is limited and then eradicated in Indonesia is something that we need to think about.
Just looking at this incredibly complex equation, and particularly within Islam itself, where you've got the schism between Shia and Sunni Muslims, and on the Shia side you've got this power emerging of Iran. And the big question mark that a lot of people have now, since we have a nuclear peace deal the United States, Obama, struck with Iran, is whether Trump will be persuaded by Israel to drop that deal. What do you think? Do you think he would?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that. I'm sure there are concerns in our part of the world. And as you said, we do have some countries that have this Shia-Sunni tension. That's the least thing that we want now is an interreligious war. We have our problem inside of Sunni Islam, which is what we call the Khawarij, the outlaws of Islam. These are the perpetrators that have done criminal acts in my country, in Europe, in yours. This is the franchise that we're dealing with. A Shia-Sunni conflict inside of the Middle East is opening Pandora's box. I mean, the fault line between Shiaism and Sunniism goes from Beirut to Bombay. So that's one last thing that we need. At this point, we need to concentrate against what we call the Khawarij, the outlaws of Islam.
Do you think it's important that the United States, and it'll be in the hands of Congress as well as the President, keep a hold of that nuclear deal with Iran? Would it upset the balance of power if the Americans decided, urged by the Israelis, to drop it?
Well, Iran has been responsible in inciting sectarian conflict in our area. And again, when you look at the Iranians, they have several cards that they play. So one of them is the nuclear card, one of them is the card that I just mentioned. They do support organizations that sometimes are considered terrorist in nature. So I think when you look at Iran, you have to look at it in its totality. And again, it's too early for us to understand where the new American policy is going to be on that. Yeah. Everybody's going to have their opinion, but I think we've got to keep it in the bigger picture aspect of things.
Yeah, I'm thinking too how that might impact on Syria with Iran, Russia, the United States and other Arab countries with really serious interests in Syria, whether that balance could be upset by something like that.
So exactly, there's so many different flavors out there. If you're going to sort of focus on one issue and make that the standard strategy for your administration, it's going to impact a lot of other things in the Middle East, all the way from Morocco to Yemen. So again, I can't put words into the new administration's mouth, but I think they're looking at it in the way the team is being put together is how do we look at it from a really strategic point of view. So if you're going to look at Iran, you have to understand that Iran does impact, well, Afghanistan on one side, but Iraq, Syria, Lebanon to an extent. We have issues in Yemen, and we have some problems in Africa. So how do we balance the new strategy of the administration with all those things integrated?
Now, you said you have good relations with people in the transitional team. And there's at least one member of the transitional team, General Michael Flynn, who's been pegged to become the National Security Advisor. And just in terms of this global war on jihadism that you're talking about, I'm wondering, could it upset that with someone like Flynn describing Islam as a cancer, a political ideology that hides behind the notion of a religion? As a National Security Advisor, could that damage relations? Could it damage the very thing you're talking about, which is trying to create a kind of global consensus to defeat jihadism?
Well, whatever comments are made on the campaign trail, I tend to put aside and give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think we should give the new administration the benefit of the doubt on this issue. And part of the problem, I think, that's been a major challenge and frustration from my point of view is, if you take some people at their word, is the complete lack of understanding of Islam and the challenges that we have. So when we say this is our civil war, the one that we're fighting, and I think most non-Muslims don't understand our religion. Do they know that we believe Jesus Christ to be the Messiah? The Virgin Mary is mentioned, I think, about 35 times in our Quran, only 25 times in the Bible, but the Bible is a lot bigger. Moses is mentioned 130 times in the Quran. So you have to understand that as a true Muslim, we believe in the Bible, the Torah, as well as the Quran. We have to have a belief in Judaism and Christianity as the other two monotheistic religions. It's those that don't understand, and it's the enemy that want to create this atmosphere that is actually us against them. And this is where I think we're going to fall into major trouble over the next couple of years if it's us against them mentality. We're actually all in the same trench, Muslims, Christians and Jews, against what I keep calling the outlaws of our
I suppose I can speak on behalf of many people in the world when I say one hopes that you might one day get in a room with Donald Trump to explain that. I mean, will you have that opportunity? I'm hoping that we will have an opportunity. As I said, I had a very good conversation with him on the phone. I met him a couple of times before, many years ago. And we have good contact with many people in his team. And I think there's an understanding, and I think that others, especially in Europe, who understand the threat from the government point of view, speak the same language that I do. Understanding where the threat is inside of Islam. It's a spectrum. There's probably not enough time in this interview to go through it. But if you understand that it's actually in the last 10% of Sunni Islam where the problem is, and even in that 10%, so probably those people you describe as the outlaws.
The outlaws of Islam. If once they understand where it is in Islam the threat is, and understand that spectrum, then we'll be able to deal with the horror and the challenge much easier. Even, I think, inside of your own societies, understanding where the problem springs from and how to identify the threat. And that's the problem with most people, I think.
I think we can actually go back in history a little bit, because there is a long history of the emergence of these kind of outlaw groups within Islam, going almost to the first century of its existence.
Absolutely, and they were so atrocious when they first appeared on the scene that Islam stood up against them and they were eradicated. And what
Do you think that will happen now?
More and more, this is where the alliance is coming from, and I think this is probably the challenge that you're having, sometimes we have with the West, is where a lot of us in the region are now into the battle of this, and when we hear of peace initiatives or discussions for promoting governments, Libya is a prime example, where a lot of us see certain individuals on the ground that are actually taking the fight to the extremists. At this stage, people want to come in and look at the democratic process of Libya, and we're saying, guys, we're in the middle of a war, and the war for us is very clear. It's them against us. And I think that's the problem. And as I said, that is a small percentage that we're up against, that cherry-pick the Quran to sort of say it's okay to blow yourself up and kill innocent people, to subjugate women. That's got nothing to do with our religion. So we Muslims are the first people that need to stand up and say this is our fight, but we can't do it by ourselves.
Yes, and on the other side of the equation, we see the emergence of right-wing groups through Europe, a right-wing splinter group taking a section or cross-section of power in Australia even, and of course big question marks over the new administration and the way they will feel about Muslims. You've got Donald Trump, for example, talking about banning all Muslims coming to his country during the campaign. How dangerous is it, if you want to fight a global war against jihadism, to allow these voices to become prominent?
Yeah. So whatever, as I said before, whatever is said on campaigns, I take with a pinch of salt, and I think give the new administration the benefit of the doubt. The problem with that type of rhetoric, it falls right into the lap of what the extremists, the Khawarij, the outlaws of Islam want, because they feel that the only way that they can get global supremacy is to take the 90% of moderate Sunnis, make them isolated, picked on and marginalized, so that they are shifted over to the radical camp. So the more that you get these extremist statements said all over the world, we're actually doing exactly what the Khawarij want.
Does it make you despair when you see that happening? Because
every day.
It's all fed in by the Syrian conflict, the flow of refugees, the massive flow into Europe, and then the emergence within those groups of what some refer to as Trojan horse individuals or small groups of radicals.
But it also has, I think, most of us Muslims equally despairing when we see a small element of Islam in the name of Islam saying things and doing things that have got nothing to do with our religion. From the traditional schools of Islam, it is almost impossible for any of us to put a bomb on ourselves and think that it's a good thing to blow yourself up in a marketplace and kill innocent people. I mean, when we say strong Christian moral values, we look at each other and say we have strong Muslim values also. Those are the people that understand humanity and mercy. These people that we're dealing with are just the enemy of all of us, because they have no concept of what religion is all about.
Now, again, because you mentioned the danger of this, these emerging voices from the right who are basically saying stop all refugees, stop all migration and so on, without naming any particular individuals making those statements. Would it worry you if in Europe a situation emerged where the European governments decided to do what Australia did, turn back the boats? Turn back boatloads of Syrian refugees heading for Europe?
Well, look, I mean, we all have to understand people's insecurities, because it has been a very rough couple of years, and it's not something that's going to be fixed in a day or two. We're hoping that in the short term, the military aspect of this thing is done, but then the longer term aspect is the ideological warfare that's going to take at least a good decade. You can understand countries that feel their sense of insecurity because of terrorism and because certain people could be labeled coming from that sector. We accepted, as 20% of our population now is Syrian refugees.
1.3 million people in your country.
2.5 million who have been through Jordan at one time or another of Syrian refugees. It doesn't count the Libyans, the Yemenis, and some of the Iraqis that we already have in our country. But out of the Syrians, exactly. And I was asked many questions by Jordanians that were getting just as frustrated seeing that 20% of their country are now Syrian refugees, the impact it has on jobs, on property, on unemployment. And they ask me, stop the Syrians coming into the country. And I say, how? When you have a mother, a pregnant mother with a child in their hand trying to cross the border, how are we going to stop her? I mean, do we sort of point bayonets at these people that are running away from horrible and threatening lives? There is a level of humanity that we have to reach out to each other. So it's very easy to say, let's not do that. But we do also have a moral responsibility.
Your Majesty, that does seem quite a good place for us to leave the interview. I know you've on a tight schedule here, and we thank you very much and appreciate the time you've given us.
Thank you very much, sir. Great pleasure.
التقت كتلة الإصلاح النيابية برئاسة النائب عبد الله العكايلي رئيس الوزراء دكتور هاني الملقي وعددا من الوزراء. أكد العكايلي أهمية استمرارية اللقاءات بين الكتلة والحكومة لتكون نهجا للعمل والتشارك بما يخدم الوطن والمواطن. أكد أعضاء الكتلة أن الحركة الإسلامية حركة وطنية تضع في سلم أولوياتها مصلحة الأردن وأمنه واستقراره وحمايته بكل السبل. وأكدت الكتلة على أن الهاجس الأكبر في هذه المرحلة هو الوضع الاقتصادي، مشددة على عدم اتخاذ أي إجراءات من شأنها التضييق على المواطن في قوته ومعيشته، ضرورة محاربة الفساد، تعزيز المساءلة والمحاسبة، ومحاربة الإرهاب والتطرف والفكر الهدام وآفة المخدرات. طلبت الكتلة بمزيد من التوضيح حول التعديلات على المناهج الدراسية. من جانبه أكد رئيس الوزراء على أهمية هذه اللقاءات واستمراريتها والبناء عليها لوضع الأمور في نصابها، مؤكدا التزام الحكومة بالتشاركية الحقيقية مع مجلس الأمة لعبور التحديات التي تواجه الوطن على الصعود كافة. كما أكد أن حرية التعبير والرأي مصونة بموجب الدستور ويجب تعزيزها دون الإساءة للوطن وللأشخاص، وأن تكون مبنية على معلومة صحيحة بعيدا عن الشائعات، مجددا التزام الحكومة بمحاربة أشكال الفساد كافة وفتح ملفاته وتحقيق العدالة بين الجميع. وشدد الملقي على أن سياسة الحكومة الاقتصادية والإجراءات التي ستنتهجها بالتشارك مع مجلس النواب لن تطال رفع أسعار الخبز والمواد الأساسية. عرض رئيس الوزراء استراتيجية الحكومة بمجال الطاقة التي تركز على أمن التزود بالطاقة وتنوع مصادرها. وبشأن اتفاقية الغاز أشار رئيس الوزراء إلى أنه ومن منطلق الشفافية فقد تم نشر تفاصيل الاتفاقية كافة في الصحف اليومية، لافتا إلى أن الاتفاقية التي تم توقيعها بشأن استيراد الغاز هي مع شركة أمريكية وتحقق وفرا ماليا قدره 300 مليون دولار. وأشار إلى أن الاتفاقية مشابهة للاتفاقية التي تم توقيعها عام 2015 مع شركة شل العالمية التي تستورد الغاز من أي مكان دون شروط بشأن شهادة المنشأ، مؤكدا استعداد الحكومة لمناقشة التطور الذي جرى على المناهج، التقرير الذي أعدته لجنة مراجعة المناهج مع لجنة التربية والتعليم النيابية. وصل مجلس النواب في جلسته الصباحية برئاسة رئيس المجلس عاطف الطراونة وحضور رئيس الوزراء هاني الملقي وهيئة الوزارة مناقشة البيان الوزاري للحكومة. هذا وأعلن رئيس مجلس النواب المهندس عاطف الطراونة أن التصويت على الثقة بالحكومة سيكون مساء هذا اليوم. أكدت إدارة الجامعة الأردنية أنه سيتم فصل كل طالب يثبت بنتيجة التحقيق مشاركته في المشاجرة التي اندلعت داخل الحرم الجامعي تنفيذا لنظام تأديب الطلبة. قالت الجامعة في تصريح صحفي أصدرته اليوم إنه تم تعليق الدراسة في الجامعة إثر دخول مجموعة من الأشخاص عنوة إلى الحرم الجامعي وتجمعهم لمدة نصف ساعة في الساحة الرئيسية دون حصول أي اشتباك مع جهة أخرى. نفى الكرملين أن تكون روسيا على علم بمشاركة عسكريين مصريين في المعارك بسوريا في صفوف قوات موالية للحكومة. من جهة ثانية واصلت القوات السورية تقدمها في المناطق الخاضعة لسيطرة المعارضة في الأحياء الشرقية من مدينة حلب شمالي البلاد.
بين الشد والجذب السياسي والعسكري على الأرض السورية ومناشدات منظمات دولية بوقف مأساة حلب، يتهم الجيش التركي دمشق بقتل 3 جنود أتراك وإصابة 10 آخرين بغارات جوية في منطقة الباب السورية القريبة من حدود البلدين. وهذه هي المرة الأولى التي تتهم فيها أنقرة دمشق بقتل جنود أتراك بعد أن كانت قد اتهمت عصابة داعش الإرهابية بقتلهم. وتحتدم المواجهات بين وحدات حماية الشعب الكردية وفصائل مسلحة سورية تدعمها تركيا للسيطرة على منطقة الباب التي تبعد نحو 31 كيلومترا عن مدينة حلب. وتوشك منطقة الباب الاستراتيجية السورية على أن تتحول لساحة قتال بين الأكراد وتركيا والجيش السوري للسيطرة عليها، إذ أن الجهة التي تسيطر عليها ستحقق مكاسب عسكرية مهمة. وفي خضم تلك الأحداث ارتفع عدد قتلى غارات الطائرات السورية على أحياء مدينة حلب الشرقية التي تتحصن فيها فصائل مسلحة إلى 27، في الوقت الذي تمنع فيه الفصائل المسلحة العائلات بمناطق سيطرتها على أحياء حلب الشرقية من مغادرة المناطق الواقعة تحت سيطرتها من خلال المعابر التي خصصها الجيش السوري إلى مناطق آمنة. في هذه الأثناء دعت فرنسا لعقد اجتماع دولي لوقف ما وصفته بهجمة النظام السوري على أحياء حلب الشرقية التي تسيطر عليها الفصائل المسلحة التي يسعى الجيش السوري لإخراجهم منها. مجد الزبن، التلفزيون الأردني.
فر عشرات آلاف المدنيين العراقيين من تل عفر مع اقتراب القوات العراقية من البلدة التي تسيطر عليها عصابة داعش الإرهابية. وتقع تل عفر على الطريق بين مدينتي الموصل والعراقية والرقة السورية مع قلاع عصابة داعش الرئيسين في البلدين. من جهة ثانية، أعلنت مصادر محلية بمحافظة نينوى أن طائرات التحالف الدولي دمرت الجسر الحديدي العتيق بمدينة الموصل، مستكملة عزل الجانب الأيمن عن الأيسر من المدينة بشكل كامل. ندد مبعوث الأمم المتحدة إلى الشرق الأوسط بقرارين اتخذتهما إسرائيل في الآونة الأخيرة لتكثيف الاستيطان في الضفة الغربية المحتلة، داعيا إياها لوقف ممارساتها غير القانونية. من جانب آخر، اعتقلت قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي 15 مواطنا فلسطينيا بمناطق متفرقة من الضفة الغربية. وقال نادي الأسير الفلسطيني أن قوات الاحتلال اقتحمت مدن نابلس ورام الله وبيت لحم والخليل سلفت وسط إطلاق نار كثيف خلال عملياتها لاعتقال المواطنين الفلسطينيين بزعم أنهم مطلوبون. أعلنت الشرطة الإسرائيلية إجلاء مئات المواطنين الفلسطينيين من بيوتهم في مدينة حيفا شمال البلاد بسبب حرائق اندلعت في عدد من الأحياء، ولم يبلغ عن إصابات حتى الآن. وقال الناطق باسم الشرطة الإسرائيلية إن الحرائق وصلت لنحو 8 إلى 10 شوارع في المدينة حيفا، إلى أن هناك أشخاص عالقين بمواقع النيران. وكان رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي بنيامين نتنياهو ووزير الأمن الداخلي جلعاد أردن قد طالب المساعدة من تركيا واليونان وقبرص وإيطاليا لإخماد النار. مشاهدينا الأكارم، وصلنا لختام هذه النشرة، وهذا تذكير لأبرز ما جاء فيها. جلالة الملك يلتقي مسؤولين أستراليين ومتخصصين في الشؤون الخارجية والدفاع والأمن ومحاربة الإرهاب. الملقي يؤكد خلال لقائه كتلة الإصلاح النيابية التزام الحكومة بالتشاركية الحقيقية مع مجلس الأمة. مجلس النواب يواصل مناقشة بيان الحكومة الوزاري والتصويت على الثقة بالحكومة مساء هذا اليوم. شكرا لطيب المتابعة، استودعكم.